And we skip away of the violence of white supremacy because we talk about the township, we talk about poverty as things that are it's just irrelevant. That lady's story is so powerful because it's the story of my mother, it's my story, it's the story of every black person in this room who has been dispossessed, who lives under violence every day in this country. So I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't want you to live in ways that you want to give back the land, because I want to take back the land, because for me, psychologically, it's very important that I take back the land. You don't give it back to me because it was taken back forcefully under colonialism. So I want to decolonize this country. And maybe if it means that an army of black people in this country take arms in order to do that, then maybe it needs to happen. But I'm tired of these debates.
White supremacy in South Africa refers to the historical and ongoing system of racial oppression and inequality that has marginalized black South Africans and other non-white populations. Its root can be traced back to colonialism, particularly with the arrival of the Dutch and British settlers, who established racial hierarchies favoring white people. Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
And we skip away of the violence of white supremacy because we talk about the township, we talk about poverty as things that are it's just irrelevant. That lady's story is so powerful because it's the story of my mother, it's my story, it's the story of every black person in this room who has been dispossessed, who lives under violence every day in this country. So I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't want you to live in ways that you want to give back the land, because I want to take back the land, because for me, psychologically, it's very important that I take back the land. You don't give it back to me because it was taken back forcefully under colonialism. So I want to decolonize this country. And maybe if it means that an army of black people in this country take arms in order to do that, then maybe it needs to happen. But I'm tired of these debates.
When you've taken the land back, make sure you give it to the rightful owners in terms of the truth. Give it to the Khoi and the San people there. Yes! They are the rightful owners. If you want to take back the land, give it to the rightful owners. But you see, the problem is black people are the rightful owners. Where did they get the land?
Is that what you're saying?
No. History is much more complicated than that. Much more complicated. And we can go and have a look at that. But it's a myth. It's a myth to just claim that everything belonged to this, nothing belonged to that. It's a myth. If people start talking about war, we are in a very, very dangerous situation. It's very easy to incite violence. You don't know what you're talking about now. I would suggest that we all move away from
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
And luckily I know that the majority of people in this country from different communities are not interested in violence. They are not interested in conflict and war. Those are side elements that should not be allowed to destroy the fabric of social cohesion in this country.
All right.
I think for me, I'm not obsessed with whiteness. I'm obsessed with black liberation. And I'm obsessed with the rebuilding of black humanity in this country. So to read my obsession with black liberation as an obsession with whiteness, I think is incorrect, because we live in a society that is very dishonest about the kind of power, the kind of brutality that white bodies, even without doing anything, hold. And so for PJ Powers to come and sing a very mediocre song and make money over the years about using Zulu culture and using cultural appropriation is exact kinds of power that white people hold in this space. And there's a generation of young people who are sitting, some of them sitting in this audience, who are moving away from the lies of Mandela to say, actually, we want the land at this point in time.
Woo! Good child. PJ, I'll give you the honor of replying. Yeah.
With regards to Jabulani, in 1982, it was probably before you were born, I went into Soweto with a rock song called You're So Good To Me. It didn't have a black note on it. I think some of the older people may remember it. It was You're So Good To Me. It was a rock song that suddenly charted on the Radio Zulu charts. So if you think that I adapted black culture, that is not the case at all. In fact, the black people put me on their wings, okay, and carried me and have ever since. It is something I'm incredibly proud and grateful for, and it hurts me to see somebody that I have fought for my entire life, okay, in my own way, in what I can do. I'm not a politician, I'm not a statistician, I can't do any of those things. What I can do is talk out about whinging whites that we have in this country, and I will always have loved and always will love this country. The book that I've written is dedicated to the people of Soweto.
All right.
There you have it.
I call you a rainbowist. I think we all used to be rainbowists at some point or other, at the start of our democracy.
Yes.
But a lot's changed. A lot has happened.
The question is
Are your
why?
ideas still relevant?
Absolutely, because the Constitution is still relevant, whether we like it or not. And we all remember what it was like in 1994 and the whole concept of the Rainbow Nation. Why do we have this debate today? What changed? I believe that leaders should set the tone. And President Mandela and other leaders at the time set a certain tone in terms of why and how we should take South Africa forward.
All right. Rebecca, are all white people racist?
100%. How can you be a white South African and not be racist? And I don't mean that in the way of you necessarily consciously think that black people are inferior. I mean that there is just no way that you could have been born into this society without internalizing racist assumptions. But let's not make that the end of the conversation. It's not racist, it's just a fact. Let's not make that the end of the conversation. Let's say, yes, sure, we are all racist, and what are we going to do about it? Let's move on. Let's not make that the final insult.
Monique, do you agree with Rebecca saying 100%?
No,
all
I
white people are
totally
racist.
disagree with what she's saying. I think that whiteness and white privilege has become this buzzword that you hear all the time. But actually, it's a way to silence anyone that is not of color. What she was basically saying is, if you are a white person, you are racist just because you are white. Without any evidence, I am not a racist person. I respect all people. I respect black people, white people, colored people. So I feel it's very offensive to say that all white people are racist. It's just not true. And I think that to make whiteness the enemy is easier to fight than to fight the crippling corruption, to fight unemployment, to fight fight the wealth gap, because the political leaders that we have cannot fight that stuff. They don't have the skills to fight that, and then they make race the problem.
Ooh, Sarah.
Sorry.
You look like you totally disagree here.
I do totally disagree. I think that I'm a little bit torn because I really want to reply to a bit of what Monique has said, but I also really don't want this conversation where we have a potential to disrupt whiteness to be centered around the type of whiteness that is displaying the racism that you say that you aren't. I mean, the comment about people not having skills is inherently racist.
Yes.
Just to point out one thing. I think we should have the conversation about how to give back the land. I think that's what we should do.
Do you agree with Monique?
Well, I think that what we need to look at is an element of complicity, Mr. Chaba. And I think that fundamentally what we haven't unpacked, we've gone through the TRC process, and what we haven't understood is how white people have benefited firstly from apartheid, and secondly how a particular group of white people in this country have become fabulously rich off the back of apartheid. Now, I think that white complicity overall we can look at, and the responsibility to promote social justice in our country firstly. But when we have two families, there are two families in this country, the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts, names we don't necessarily all know, who have as much wealth as 50% of our people. It's an extraordinary crime, we should call it nothing else, that must be challenged. It's a crime against our humanity, and it's the humanity of 50 million people in this country. That's precisely where we need to focus at and say, how did you make your money during apartheid? How did you build those networks? And how do you retain and entrench your power in the last 20 years? And quite clearly, no one is disrupting that power fundamentally.
All right, Loveland.
I think what Elisa was trying to raise earlier about, PJ's song, yes, struggle hero or you fought and whatever. I think the problem is that we forget that white people today have the option of tapping out, right? So you can sing Jabulani and you can dance, but then you can also remove yourself from the lived experiences of the culture that you're trying. I'm sorry, I'm speaking. the culture that you're trying to represent. That doesn't make you a bad person. It's just the truth of the situation. And I think in South Africa, this is really what the conversation needs to be about. We need to talk about, why did apartheid end? Why did colonialism end? It didn't end because people's perspectives and behavior changed. It ended because it was expensive. It ended because white people couldn't travel anymore. It ended because they couldn't go and play sport, because entertainment for white people was over. Therefore, they needed to bring equality. That's not, we need to be honest. We must be honest about this. So for me, when we want to have this conversation, it's easy to say, let's talk about the Rainbow Nation. Of course, you can look forward if your life was never tainted by the experience of apartheid. Of course, you can look forward. It's not the same. And that's the experience of being black, constantly having to reconcile your existence, reconcile your humanity, and demand respect and demand a level of humanity, as opposed to what other people just get automatically by being white. That's the reality. You don't have to label it as racism if you don't want to, but it is what it is.
All right. We do also have to think about what whiteness means. Is it about skin color? WlLD, you have said that perhaps we need to target the black elite. What are your thoughts so far?
Well, there was a comment about Oppenheimer and Rupert, but what about Patrice Motsepe? He's a multi-billionaire, so why aren't you mentioning him? What about Cyril Ramaphosa? That's another multi-billionaire in this country. What we're talking here, black liberation. Black liberation, we achieved black liberation in 1994. Okay, you may not
well,
like
it's not
it.
Felt in this room.
You may think you got nothing out of it, but we have a class of black people here who are multi.
As we should have.
Yes,
it is their country. We should have rich black people.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have them. I say we don't have. Blacks are not oppressed by anyone in South Africa.
Wow.
If they are, tell me who's oppressing them. If they are oppressed,
so if we are oppressed,
WlLD,
who is oppressing us?
I think I hear what you're saying, because, you know, you running your books and the political elites in the ANC are not oppressed, because you are doing the oppressing at the moment, along with white. You are the gatekeeper of whiteness. You represent the gatekeeper of whiteness. And you sold us out. You sold us out. And to say that you fought for my freedom, you didn't fight for anything, because I'm not free at the moment.
I merely said I did what I could. And one other thing, do you think for a second, I as a white person do not agree with both you and you? Have you ever thought that maybe I agree with you?
I don't care. At this point in time, white feelings, white opinions don't matter to me, because I need the land.
Ladies,
I need the land.
I need us to think about all of us. I'd love to come to you, Tiens.
It is unacceptable that inequality is so high in our country. A Gini coefficient of 65% is the second highest in the world, if not the highest in the world. The question I think we should ask is, how can that be changed? Now, there are people here saying, give us the land, then that will change. That may be. I want to say, what is the biggest empowering mechanism in any government's hands, in any nation's hands? No, it's education. What I'm perplexed about is that instead of holding a democratically elected government accountable after 22 years, what do we focus on? On 10 million or 10% people in the country.
The 10% who own the majority of the wealth.
Not all of them.
You own the government.
You know, we can say, city of the land, I've got the constitution here. Yes, let's work with the constitution and the national development plan and go forward. We should hold this government and all the political parties accountable.
What about rich black people?
Yes.
So who mistreat other black people, like Kulubuse Zuma, who's now been forced by the courts to pay his 5,300 workers. What about him?
In South Africa, it happens to be that the majority of white South Africans, just by virtue of their existence and the access to assets and everything that they have, are very much the huge culprits in this conversation. It doesn't mean, I'm sorry, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean, right? It doesn't mean that there are black people that are doing things that are wrong. But why is that the immediate equal of it in the conversation? Will we then acknowledge that the entire apartheid machinery was also corrupt, and that that it was affirmative action for white people?
Yeah. All right, Henny, you've actually documented how white fortune was made. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chaba, I think firstly, we need to appreciate our country was at war, right? And our country was at war for decades. And the last 10 or 15 years of that war saw all manner of crimes. In order for the apartheid regime to be able to buy weapons, to buy oil, for large corporations to move their cash offshore, they broke all the rules in the book and made a network of people around the world incredibly wealthy out of that process, and people in our country. So I think for us as a nation, again, to move forward, we need a full understanding. For there to be true justice in our country, there has to be truth. And I think when it comes to economic justice, this is a crucial element that must be the focus of us moving forward.
These are some key points. 1. Colonial era. Dutch and British colonizer implemented laws and practices that oppressed indigenous population, leading to land dispossession and social marginalization. 2. Apartheid, 1948 to 1994. The formalization of white supremacy occurred during apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation that privileged white South Africans politically, economically, and socially. Laws enforced separation, restricted movement, and denied rights to non-white citizens. At number 3, post-apartheid challenges. Despite the end of apartheid in 1994 and the establishment of a democratic government, the legacy of white supremacy persists through significant economic disparities, social inequalities, and ongoing racial tensions. And lastly, continued presence. Right-wing movements and pockets of white supremacy ideology still exist, resisting efforts toward land reform and equity. Structural racism remains embedded in various institutions, contributing to the ongoing struggles of black South Africans for social and economic justice. White supremacy in South Africa has a deep historical context and continues to impact the socio-economic landscape despite significant progress since the end of apartheid. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to like and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.